All right, welcome back, you guys. So the last time we read, we finished chapter 6, and in chapter 6, Bud goes to the mission, kind of like a soup kitchen, to get some food, and a family pretends that he is their son so that he doesn't have to go starving. It was really nice of them. And so now we're picking up on chapter 7, page 53, and now Bud is on his own. Let's see what he gets into next. Here we go. I pushed the heavy door open and walked into the library. The air in the library isn't like the air anywhere else. First, it's always cooler than the air outside. It feels like you're walking into a cellar on a hot July day, even if you have to walk up a bunch of stairs to get into it. The next thing about the air in the library is that no other place smells anything like it. If you close your eyes and try to pick out what it is that you're sniffing, you're only going to get confused because all the smells, page 54, have blended together and turned themselves into a different one. As soon as I get into the library, I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. I got a whiff of the leather on all the old books, a smell that got real strong if you picked one of them up and stuck your nose real close to it when you turned the pages. Then there was the smell of the cloth that covered the brand new books, the books that made a splitting sound when you opened them. Then I could sniff the paper, that soft, powdery, drowsy smell that comes off the pages in little puffs when you're reading something or looking at some pictures, a kind of hypnotizing smell. I think it's that smell that makes so many folks fall asleep in the library. You'll see someone turn a page and you can imagine a puff of a page powder coming up really slow and easy until it starts piling on the person's eyelashes, weighing their eyes down so much that they stay down a little longer after each blink and finally making them so heavy that they just don't come back up at all. Then their mouths come open and their heads start bouncing up and down like they're bobbing in a big tub of water for apples. And before you know it, whoop, zoop, swoop, they're out cold and their face thunks down smack dab on the book. That's the part that gets the librarians the maddest. They get real upset if folks starts drooling in the books. And the page powder or not, they don't want to hear no excuses. You gotta get out. Drooling in the books is even worse than laughing out loud in the library. And even though it might seem kind of mean, you can't really blame the librarians for tossing drooly folks out because there's nothing worse than opening a book and having the pages all stuck together from somebody's dried up slobber. I opened my eyes and started looking for Miss Hill. She wasn't at the lending desk, so I left my suitcase with the white lady there. I knew it would be safe. I walked between the stacks to see if Miss Hill was putting books up. 3 doggone times I walked through the library, upstairs and down, and couldn't find her. I went back up to the librarian at the lending desk. I waited until she looked up at me. She smiled and said, "Yes, would you like to retrieve your suitcase?" She reached under the desk. I said, "Not yet, ma'am. Could I ask you a question?" She said, "Of course, young man. How may I help you?" "I'm looking for Miss Hill." The librarian looked surprised. "Miss Hill? My goodness, hadn't you heard?" "Uh-oh. That's number 16 of Bud Caldwell's Rules and Things for Having a Funner Life and Making a Better Liar Out of Yourself. That's one of the worst ones." Page 56. Rules and Things number 16. If a grown-up ever starts a sentence by saying, "Haven't you heard?" get ready, because what's about to come out of their mouth is going to drop you head first into boiling tragedy. It seems like the answer to "haven't you heard" always has something to do with someone kicking the bucket. And not kicking the bucket in a calm, peaceful way like a heart attack at home in bed either. It usually is some kind of dying that will make your eyes buck out of your head when you hear about it. It's usually the kind of thing that will run you out of a room with your hands over your ears and your mouth wide open. Something like hearing that your grandmother got her whole body pulled through the wringer on a washing machine, or something like hearing about a horse slipping on the ice and landing on some kid you went to school with. I answered, "No, ma'am," and got my stomach ready to hear about Miss Hill biting the dust in some way that was going to give me nightmares. The librarian said, There's no need for you to look so stricken. It's not bad news, young man. She laughed a quiet librarian-type laugh. Really, it's not bad news at all, unless you had matrimonial plans concerning Miss Hill. I pretended I knew what she was talking about. Most times if you listen to how grown-ups folks ask a question, they let you know what it is they want to hear. I said, "No, ma'am, I didn't plan that at all." She laughed again and said, "Good, because I don't think her new husband would appreciate the competition. Charlemagne. Miss Hill is currently living in Chicago, Illinois." I said, "Husband? You mean she got married, ma'am?" The librarian said, "Oh, yes. And I must tell you, she was radiating happiness." I said, "And she moved all the way to Chicago?" "That's right. But Chicago isn't that far. Here, I'll show you." She reached under her desk and pulled out a thick leather book called Atlas of the United States of America. She thumbed through a couple of pages and said, "Here we are." She turned the book to me. It was this big map of Michigan and a couple of the states that were next to it. "We're here," she pointed to the spot that said Flint, "and Chicago is here in Illinois." They looked pretty close, but I know how tricky maps can be. Shucks, they can put the whole world on one page on a map, so I said, "How long would it take someone to walk that far?" She said, "Oh dear, quite a while, I'm afraid. Let's check the distance." Page 58. She reached under the desk and pulled out another thick book called Standard Highway Mileage Guide and turned to a page that had 1,000,000 numbers and city names on it. She showed me how to find Chicago on the line that was running across the page and Flint on the line that was running down the page, and then to look at the number that was writ where the two of them joined up. It said 270. She pulled a pencil out and said, "Okay, this is how one figures the amount of time required to walk to Chicago." Now, she pulled out a third book. Shucks, this is one of the bad things about talking to librarians. I ask one question, and already she has digging through 3 different books. She thumbed through the book until she said, "Aha! It says here that the average male human gait is 5 miles an hour. Okay, assuming that you could cover 5 miles an hour, all we have to do is divide 270 by 5. She did it and said, 54 hours. Much too long to be practical. No, I'm afraid you'll simply have to wait until Mrs. Rollins comes back to Flint for a visit. Shucks, Chicago might as well be a million miles away from Flint, and Miss Hill might as well be a squashed, crunched-up mess in a washing machine when it came down to helping me now. I thanked the librarian for the bad news and went to sit at one of the big, heavy tables so I could think of what to do next. Going back to the home was out. It used to be that we'd get a new kid every once in a while, but lately it seems like there's a couple of new kids every day, mostly babies, and they're almost always sick. It's not like it was when I first got there. Shucks, half the folks that run it don't even tell you their name and don't remember yours unless you're in trouble all the time or getting ready to move out. After a while, I got my suitcase and walked into the regular air and still stinking smells of Flint. The library door closing after I walked out was the exact kind of door Mama had told me about. I knew that since it had closed, the next one was about to open. I went back under my tree, and before I knew it, I was asleep. Page 60, Chapter 8. Something stepped on a little stick. As soon as the twig cracked, my eyes snapped open and I was wide awake. I held my breath and kept as still as I could. Whatever it was that was sneaking up on me knew I'd woke up because it stopped moving and kept as still as it could too. Even though my head was still under my blanket, I could feel 2 eyes staring at me real hard. And I knew these weren't critter eyes. These eyes made the hair on the back of my neck raise up the way only human beings' eyes can do. Page 61. Without wiggling or jiggling around too much under my blanket, I got my fingers wrapped around my jackknife. Right when I was ready to push the covers off of me and start running or stabbing, whoever it was that had been watching jumped right on top of me. I was trapped as a roach under a dish rag. I tried to guess the exact spot that the person's heart was, then pulled my knife back. A voice said, "If you ain't a kid called Bud from the home, I'm really sorry about jumping on you like this." It was Bugs! Then I tried to talk. It felt like I had to suck all the air out of Flint. I finally got breathing right and said, "Doggone, Bugs, it is me! You nearly scared me to death." He got off of me and I threw the blanket over to the side. "You don't know how lucky you are. I was just fixing to stab you in the heart." Bugs looked like he knew he had just had a real close call. He said, "I'm sorry, Bud. I didn't mean to scare you, but everybody knows how you like to sleep with the knife open, so I figured I'd best grab hold of you so you wouldn't wake up slicing nobody." Shucks, even though it was Bugs who'd come real close to getting his heart poked, I was the one who was still having trouble catching my breath. I asked, "How come you aren't back at the home?" But before he had a chance to answer, I knew. "You're on the lam?" Page 62. Bug said, "Yup, I'm going back to riding the rails. When I heard about you beating that kid up so bad that you had to take off, I figured it was time for me to get going too. I thought you might be hanging around the library, so I come down to see if you wanted to go with me." "Where are you heading?" "There's always fruits to be picked out west. I heard we can make enough money to get by out there. There's supposed to be a train leaving sometime tomorrow. Did you really beat up that kid in the foster home?" I said, we kind of had a fight. "How long's it take to get out west?" Bug said, "Depends on how many trains you got to hop." "Was he really 2 years older than you?" He was 12. "Is it fun to hop on the train?" "Some of the time it is. Some of the time it's scary. We heard he was kind of big too, was he?" I said, "He was pretty big." I can't see how we can hop on a train. They look like they're moving pretty doggone fast." Bug said, "Most times you don't hop them when they're going fast. Most times you try to climb on one when it's sitting in the train yard." "Did the guy cry after you whooped him?" "Well, kind of. He looked real scared, then told his mama to keep me away from him. They even said I was a hoodlum." "Will we be sleeping on the train and everything?" "Sure we will. Some of the time the train don't stop for 2 or 3 days. Man, I always try to tell people that just in case someone's skinny and it don't mean they can't fight. You're a hero now, Bud." "Nah, I didn't really do nothing much." "Well, how about the toilet? How are we going to use the toilet if the train doesn't stop?" Bug said, "You just kind of lean out of the door and go." "When the train is still moving?" "Yeah, you get a real nice breeze." "Oh man, that sounds great. Count me in. I can't wait." Bug spit a big glob of slob in his hand and said, "I knew I could depend on you, Bud." I spit a big glob in my hand and said, "We're brothers forever, Bugs." We slapped our hands together as hard as we could and got our slobs mixed up real good, then waved them in the air so they'd dry. Now it was official. I finally had a brother. Bug said, "We'll go down to the mission. There's bound to be someone there that knows where we can hop this train. Then we'll be on the lam together." I'm going to pause there, and we'll pick up the bottom of 63 and move on to 64 tomorrow.